Everyone at the funeral saw his body. Everyone mourned him. But 7 days later, he was at the front door. Same face, same voice, same memories. Only he didn't blink. He didn't sleep. And he didn't seem to understand why everyone was afraid. His girlfriend tried to tell herself it was really him. She tried to ignore the cold touch, the way animals avoided him, the strange static in the air when he spoke. But when she found his grave disturbed, she realized one horrifying truth. He came back, but whatever returned isn't him anymore. This is the host. And now, with your support, let's tell a story about death that doesn't stay dead. 7 days ago, a coffin was lowered into the ground at Greenview Cemetery. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was a new fire burning in their depths. She looked at Elias and asked, "Did you see anything strange at the gravesite?" After we left, it had been an emotional service, filled with laughter and tears, memories of a life well lived, and promises to meet again someday. There was something strange about it, like a dark stain on the otherwise perfect green carpet. Then again, he thought, grief can do strange things to a person. Finally, he sighed and nodded slowly. "Wes, I saw it too," he admitted. Placed a comforting hand on Sarah's lower back and squeezed lightly. They both knew exactly what they had seen. Something dark and shapeless had risen out of the fresh grave and watched them leave. Sure, she grieved for her husband, missed him terribly, but there was something else, something gnawing at her, whispering in the back of her mind that something wasn't right. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Sarah couldn't help but notice how well Elias seemed to handle David's death. "Thank you, Elias," Sarah whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "For everything. We were best friends, weren't we? I just wanted to say goodbye." He hadn't been overly dramatic or detached. He'd been sad, but also strong, stoic. She was pulled through the darkness, tumbling and twisting through an endless abyss, unable to control where she was going, unable to stop the terror that was gripping her heart. "Sarah," it said, and it sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Sarah, I need your help." Suddenly, she stopped falling. She landed on soft grass, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face. She looked around wildly, searching for an escape, for a way out of this nightmare, but there was none. She was trapped. It was a feeling she couldn't place, a premonition that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The dreams continued every night while Elias was visiting, his face creased with worry. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" She decided to follow the whispers. Her eyes fixed on the path leading away from her house. "I have to know," she whispered. "I think I need to go to the cemetery, whoever or whatever it was drawn to the grave, to the spot where David's body lay buried." Fear tightened its icy grip around Sarah's heart. She whispered. Together, they stared at the figure before them. A figure that was both familiar. She turned and ran, not daring to look back, not daring to see what horrors might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim her. An utterly alien, a figure that had returned from the grave, but hadn't brought life back with it, her voice trembling, squeezing the breath from her lungs. And as he did, "Your support helps us continue delivering quality horror content. Thanks for watching." Sarah noticed something strange. His eyes didn't blink. They were two dark pools, reflecting the gray sky above, devoid of any life. Their steps echoing the beat of Sarah's racing heart. As they approached the grave, Sarah's blood ran cold. The ground above the coffin was disturbed. It had been days since anyone had visited the grave. And now someone, or something, had clearly been here recently, standing before her. As real as the beating of her own heart was David. He looked at her, his eyes dark and empty, his mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. She told him, her voice barely a whisper. And each time she woke up, more frost covered her window. Sometimes she found small pebbles on her doorstep, arranged in strange patterns. Other times she'd hear whispers in the wind, just beyond the range of human hearing, yet she could feel the vibrations in her bones. She watched him walk in and close the door behind him. He looked good, she thought, even better than usual, if that was possible. A thin layer of frost covered the glass, even though it was spring and the temperature that night had been unusually warm. She shook her head, puzzled, and went back to bed. She needed air, needed to feel the sun on her skin. Whatever had come back from the grave wasn't David. She felt a presence behind her, Cold and clammy fingers brushed against her neck, sending shivers down her spine. Slowly, she turned around, her eyes wide with terror, but what she saw made her gasp. Covering the grass outside her window was a thin layer of frost. Someone, or something, had been standing right outside her window, touching it, and it had left its mark. He looked healthy, strong, alive. A pang of guilt shot through her. She knew she should be grieving, mourning the loss of her husband, but all she could think about was Elias, and she recoiled instinctively. The sight of his cold, lifeless fingers sent a jolt of fear through her. This wasn't David. Not really. Whatever had come back wasn't her husband, but something that wore his face like a mask, something that mimicked his voice but was soulless. She hadn't expected him so soon, and certainly not this late in the evening. He looked at her tired face and asked, "Can I come in?" "Come on," he said softly, guiding her towards the waiting car. The deceased had been a beloved son, a devoted husband, a loyal friend. And now he was gone, taken from them far too soon. The dream started shortly after the funeral. Every night she dreamt of being chased through dark and narrow corridors by a faceless, nameless thing. It always seemed close behind her, gaining on her, its cold, clammy touch growing closer with every step she took. She'd wake up gasping for air, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she'd spend the whole day in a panic, convinced her nightmare had somehow seeped into reality. "I think we should go," he said gently. Sarah nodded, wiping away a stray tear. She straightened her blouse and took a deep breath. "Yes, you're right. Should let them get on with it." Among the mourners stood Elias, his best friend since childhood. He wrapped his arm around the young widow's shoulder as she cried quietly into her husband's shirt, trying to offer her some small comfort. At least they'd had the decency to hold the funeral on a sunny day. The sky was the same clear blue now as it had been when they laid David to rest, the same blue that matched David's eyes. Elias cleared his throat and squeezed his friend's shoulder. As they walked away from the freshly dug grave, Elias couldn't help but steal another glance back at it. It was only after they'd driven away from the cemetery that Sarah finally turned to Elias. He frowned, confused by her question. "See what?" "Something moved near the grave," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I could have sworn I saw it move." He hesitated, torn between his desire to comfort her and his reluctance to admit what he himself had seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The following days, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. She tried to convince herself it was just grief, but it felt like a warning, a foreboding of something terrible to come. One evening, Elias came over to check on her. When he knocked on the door, she opened it with a shaky hand. "Oh, yes, of course," she stammered, stepping aside to let him enter. The two of them talked until late into the night, sharing stories and memories of David. They laughed, they cried, they reminisced about the good times. When Elias finally got up to leave, it was almost dawn. "Don't mention it," he replied, smiling sadly. He left then, and she watched him go. As she closed the door behind him, she noticed something strange. She dreamt again that night, but this time it wasn't a dream. And then she heard a voice. A familiar voice that sent shivers down her spine. And then it was gone. The next morning, Sarah got up and went straight to the window. That's when she knew, deep in her bones, that something wasn't right. Days passed and Sarah grew more and more disturbed. Then one afternoon, he looked at her. She nodded. They walked in silence to the cemetery. What had come back from the dead wasn't David. As she stared at the disturbed earth, and then she saw him. David. He took a step towards her. He reached out a hand. She stumbled back, knocking into Elias, who stood frozen in horror, his eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah screamed then, a primal scream of terror that echoed across the cemetery. Whatever had come back, it was hungry, and she didn't want to be its next meal. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, please consider supporting us. What are the scariest things you've ever found in your new house? I found a lock in the basement of my new home. It was one of those old-fashioned ones. The kind with a keyhole that has 2 slots in it, one for the key and one where you insert a little pin to turn the lock. I was getting ready to go out when I noticed that someone had obviously been messing with it because the key was stuck in it. I pushed it in all the way so I could take it out, and when I did, it snapped right in half. "I can't go any further," I asked. He shook his head sadly. You have to go back now, he insisted. It's not safe here. He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. He led me through a small town, past houses and shops, until we reached a big Victorian-style house. It looked strangely familiar. He stopped at the front door, which was painted a deep red, and he turned to me, his face pale in the moonlight. She said that there was no such thing as ghosts, and that I should stop being silly. Inside, I found a pile of old letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I carefully untied the ribbon and pulled out the letters. Slowly, I got out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs. Inside the heart was a key. Next to it was a small note written in Ethan's handwriting. It was dark and deep. Then I heard a voice. "Are you coming?" Startled, I quickly stood up. I had no idea what was down that hole, but I felt drawn to it. As if Ethan was calling to me, I carefully climbed down the ladder. On the other side, I found myself in a long, dark tunnel. I turned slowly and saw Ethan standing in front of me. The clouds parted, and the sun shone through, illuminating the meadow in a golden light. "It's time to go," he said. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "but I don't want to leave you." He smiled and kissed me on the forehead. "You have to go back now," he said. "You can't stay here. Not permanently, anyway." I knew he was right, but I didn't want to leave him. "Will I ever see you again?" I asked. He nodded. "Of course," he said. "We'll always be connected." He took the book from me and handed it to me. "Keep this with you always," he said. "It will guide you back to me." I hugged him tightly, then turned and walked away. Birds sang and flowers bloomed. It was the most beautiful day I had ever seen. Ethan and I spent the afternoon walking hand in hand through the meadow. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. I'll see you next time. We talked and laughed and played. It was the happiest day of my life. He was more solid than before and his eyes were shining. "Oh, Ethan," I cried, throwing myself into his arms. The ghost of Ethan was gone, and the house was just a regular old house again. But I knew that he was with me, that we were connected forever. I still have the book. Sometimes at night, when I'm feeling brave, I open it and remember the time I spent with Ethan. "I've found you." He hugged me tightly. "Knew you'd come for me," he whispered. "I knew you loved me." I walked slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Emma," it read, "follow the white rabbit." Suddenly, I understood. The book was a metaphor. It symbolized the path to Ethan's heart. I knew what I had to do. Raced to my room and Rum Family Bible. It was made of wood and had a brass knocker in the shape of a rabbit. Just as I knocked, a woman appeared in the window. She smiled and waved. "Come in," she said. I opened the door and stepped inside. The cottage was warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the air smelled like cinnamon and apples. The woman turned from the fire and I gasped. It was Emma. It was old and heavy, but it was also white. I carried it back to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. The moment I touched it, a wave of energy surged through me and the room began to glow brightly. When I looked up, I saw that Ethan was gone. In his place was a white rabbit. It hopped closer and nudged my hand. Then it disappeared down a hole in the floor. I peered down the banister and saw a faint light coming from the living room. I couldn't believe my eyes. Someone was sitting in one of the chairs reading a book. I walked toward it and emerged out of the tunnel and onto a grassy hill. Before me was a beautiful meadow filled with flowers and trees. In the distance, I saw a small cottage surrounded by a white picket fence. I knew I had to go there. As I walked, I could feel Ethan's presence beside me, guiding me, protecting me. The figure looked up and I froze. It was Ethan. He had a book in his hands, and his eyes were fixed on me. "But you must hurry. The sun will set soon." I thanked her and ran outside. I looked around frantically, but I couldn't see Ethan anywhere. I opened it and focused on the picture of the heart. In an instant, I was surrounded by darkness, and I felt myself falling. I landed on soft grass and quickly stood up. I looked around me and gasped. I was in the meadow from before, but the sky was dark and cloudy. I raced to the cottage and pounded on the door. "Ethan," I cried. "Where are you?" No answer. The sky darkened even more, and thunder cracked in the distance. I felt tears streaming down my face. Was it too late? Had I lost him forever? He looked different somehow, more solid. He beckoned for me to come closer. Hesitantly, I began to walk down the stairs. They were written in elegant cursive and signed simply E. As I read through them, I realized they were love letters. They spoke of a deep affection and undying love. The last letter was dated 1 month before the fire. It was addressed to a girl named Emma. The last lines read, "My dearest Emma, I love you more than anything in the world. If anything should ever happen to me, please come to this house and find me. With all my love, Ethan." My heart broke for him. It was clear that he had died believing that his love would come for him, but how could I help him now? So I decided to stay, but I slept with the lights on and the TV blaring. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ghost of Ethan standing in front of me, his face pale and his eyes filled with sorrow. And every time I tried to focus on something else, I heard his voice whispering my name. "This is my house," he whispered, "and now it's yours." Before I could respond, he opened the door and stepped inside. I hesitated for a moment, then followed him. I wrote down everything I did and left the notes in places I thought he might see them. Maybe he didn't understand English, so I also drew pictures to go along with the words. At first, nothing happened. Then strange things started to occur. Doors that I had locked would be unlocked. Electrical appliances would turn on by themselves. I often heard my name being whispered in the dead of night. I didn't know if he was watching me or if he was trying to communicate with me. "Wait," I whispered. "Who are you? Where am I?" He hesitated before answering. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't tell you that." He broke free of my grasp and disappeared around a bend in the road. Thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Was it a dream? Did I really just meet a ghost? Shaking off the dream, I figured it was just a figment of my imagination. As the day passed, I thought about the ghost and wondered who he was and why he was haunting these parts. It was then that I learned the sad truth about the house. The house in my dream was the exact replica of our house, and it had been built in 1890. It had changed hands several times throughout the years. But it was always inhabited until one day a tragic fire swept through the house and killed the only person living there, a teenage boy named Ethan. The fire had been caused by a faulty wire in the wall, and the house had been abandoned ever since. I stared at the computer screen, horrified. Could it be possible that I was living in a haunted house? Was the ghost of the boy who died in the fire trying to warn me? I decided that if he was really there, I would try to see him again that night. I called the landlord and told him about it. He came over and tried to fix it, but he couldn't get it to turn. He ended up breaking the whole thing, and then he had to go away for a few days while he ordered a replacement lock. The living room was filled with antique furniture and old photographs. A grand staircase spiraled up the wall. In the corner, an old grandfather clock chimed softly. Suddenly, the ghost turned around and smiled at me. "Welcome to your new home," he said. He said he would send someone else to check it out first, but I told him not to bother, because I wasn't going to stay there until this place got cleaned up. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Tonight we're sharing stories from our subscribers, so let's jump into our first story. The girl the ghost wouldn't let go. I was 16 years old when my mom and I moved to a quiet, nearly deserted rural town in search of a fresh start. My dad left us when I was born, and my mom finally had enough of his cheating ways. She sold our house and bought a cheap cottage in a remote area. When we arrived at the house, we were greeted by the woman who would become our neighbor and friend. She showed us around the property and warned us that the house had some quirks. Apparently, the boiler sometimes turned off in the middle of the winter, and the electricity had a mind of its own. The house was a beautiful Victorian-style home with dark wood trim and large rooms with high ceilings. My mom and I immediately fell in love with it. We moved in, unpacked, and I went to bed early that night. I woke up abruptly in the middle of the night, sitting upright in bed. I looked around me. I was in a room that wasn't mine. My bedroom was empty. Then I realized I wasn't in my house at all. I was lying in a field. I sat up and screamed as loud as I could, but no one answered. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Don't scream. You'll wake the others." I turned slowly and saw a young man with tousled brown hair and sad blue eyes staring at me. He smiled shyly and held out a hand to help me up. "Come," he said softly. "You need to come back now." I took his hand and he helped me up. As we walked, I kept glancing back at the field, which was now out of sight. We arrived at a road, and he stopped. Then I woke up. Sitting up in bed in my room in my house, my heart pounding in my chest. Sure enough, I had the same dream again. This time I followed the ghost down the road. When I entered the house, I gasped. It was the exact replica of the house I grew up in. In the morning, after my mom had gone to work, I got on the internet and searched for the address of the house in my dream. That night, I tried to convince my mom to move out, but she refused. One day, while exploring the attic, I found a dusty trunk in the corner. I sat on the floor and opened it. From then on, I began leaving notes around the house for him. Then one night I woke up to the sound of my name being called. I sat up in bed and listened. It was coming from downstairs. As I approached, I could see that the book was open to a page with a picture of a heart. Curiosity overcame me, and I leaned over to peer into the hole. At the end of the tunnel, I saw a faint light. When I reached the cottage, I knocked on the door. "Ethan," I whispered. She nodded. "He's waiting for you," she said. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Don't cry, Emma. I'm here." And then the most amazing thing happened. As the sun began to set, Ethan took my hand. When I arrived back at my house, everything was the same as before. Love from the dead is a trap. Thanks for watching. Do you believe in ghosts? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever heard an echo that wasn't an echo? That was my question for you at the beginning of this story. If you haven't yet, maybe this next part will give you some perspective. So far, we have a lighthouse keeper hearing knocks on the door of his isolated tower, but when he opens it, no one is there. For over 300 years, it has been home to hundreds of monks who come here to meditate and attain enlightenment. Because what goes on in there isn't exactly normal. He was a young monk with a bright future ahead of him, or so everyone thought. And the terrifying visions he was having, things he couldn't possibly have made up, faint at first, then louder, echoing down the corridors and through the mountains, the sound of chanting carried on the wind. Some said it was just the wind, whistling through the cliffs and playing tricks on their ears. He was tired of the rumors and the superstitions surrounding the old building. As the night wore on, he continued his work, the scratching of the chisel echoing in the large space. Finally, the door was wide enough for him to squeeze through, and he stepped inside. So he called for a novice, someone new to the order, someone impressionable and obedient. Then he turned to the statue of the tiger, its red eyes gleaming in the candlelight, and waited. It was Lama Dorje. He had finally found peace, and he was sharing his enlightenment with the novice. From then on, no one stayed in the room alone. The chanting continued at night, and so did the apparitions. And now, there are two voices chanting behind the door. Or if you want to get early access to my stories, support my work, or just hang out with me on a semi-regular basis, consider becoming a member. It's a great way to help me grow as a storyteller, and lets me keep making more of these videos for free for everyone. Some say it's the novice and the old monk forever trapped together in a silent retreat, but others say it's the wind. The walls of the room were covered with writings, each one more insane than the last. The novice's eyes rolled back and he slumped over in the chair, mumbling in a voice that wasn't his own. "Let go of everything. You have nothing to fear. Embrace the emptiness. It's all there is." But nothing happened. No voice whispered in his ear. No shadow fell across the room. No chanting echoed through the cliffs. Just the wind outside and the sound of his own breathing. He told them to bring a hammer and chisel and to stay in the room overnight. And if whatever was making those noises wanted to talk to someone, it would talk to him. Then they noticed something else. In the candle wax, scrunched between the stone and the wood, were two sets of lips. The novice and another, much older set belonging to an emaciated old man with fangs bared in a silent scream. But others said the Lama never left. His spirit is trapped here forever meditating, waiting for his physical form to catch up with him, waiting to be freed. Things like the tiger is real, its claws dripping with blood. And the mandala shimmers before me, beckoning me closer. It was considered dangerous, cursed, haunted. But after a while, people became curious. What was going on in there? When the sun finally rose, the other monks rushed to the door. He burst through it to find the novice sitting calmly in the chair, a smile on his face and a look of pure serenity in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. They pried his jaw open and pushed his tongue forward. He still wasn't making a sound. Who or what was making those sounds? The answer, as far as anyone could tell, was nobody. There was no way to get inside, not without risking your sanity. The door was locked from the inside and no one knew the key. They found his food untouched, his blanket neatly folded beside him, and his meditation beads still clutched in his hand. No struggle, no disturbance. He had simply vanished. But when his parents came to visit him from their home across the plains, something strange happened. After they left, he didn't come out of the room for days, subsisting on water and rice brought to him by the other monks. Then he stopped eating altogether and simply meditated. Facing the tiger statue, refusing all attempts by the other monks to break his silence, every day they could hear him chanting scriptures under his breath, and every evening, when the sky outside grew dark, they would hear him stop. The building contains one single room, completely empty, except for a worn wooden chair, small table, a bed, and a diary resting open on top of it. The room is otherwise bare, unadorned, uncluttered. Nothing else is in there except an enormous stone statue of a snarling tiger in the corner, its eyes glowing red in the flickering light of a butter lamp hanging from its mouth. No pictures, no books, nothing to distract any visitors from the task at hand, meditating until you become enlightened or die trying. But most people pass it by without realizing its magnificence, because it's hidden away up in the cliffs, approached by steep staircases clinging to the side of a sheer rock face. And even if you did see it, you probably wouldn't notice one particular building nestled into the rocks, almost invisible, overshadowed by the towering cliffs around it. But if you looked really hard, you might see a weathered sign above the door saying "Silence is golden." And below that, a faded hand-painted image of a monk in deep meditation. A woman hears whispering coming from her dead husband's radio. Then when she finally gets a clear message through the static, it's her own voice telling her to turn the radio to a certain frequency, which leads us to our next story about a man who is inexorably drawn to an isolated place by an echo. I'm working on a horror anthology based around audio and visual cues. This is Echoes in the Monk's Chamber. Located high up in the remote mountains of Bhutan is a sacred Buddhist monastery called Tuksang Tiger's Nest. No one enters that building unless they are already a monk themselves. That's what happened to Lama Dorje, who disappeared in the room 30 years ago. Then one day, someone found his diary. Inside it, they read about his determination to reach enlightenment. But as the years passed and new generations of monks came and went, they began hearing something strange at night. Someone, or something, chanting in the room. For a long time, no one dared enter the room, until one day, the abbot of the monastery decided that enough was enough. The novice entered the room, lit a candle, and began chipping away at the mortar between the stones, slowly opening up the door. He saw the worn chair, the unmade bed, the diary with its cryptic messages. So he did what anyone would do, sat down in the chair, closed his eyes, and waited for dawn. And when they looked inside his mouth, they saw that it was completely empty, as though something had eaten away his entire vocal tract. As soon as the other monks saw the apparition, they dropped to their knees and bowed their heads. When the other monks entered the room the next morning, they found the novice missing and 2 sets of lips imprinted in the candle wax. Some echoes are not just memories, they're invitations. If you liked this story, check out another one about a haunted radio that also appeared in an episode of the No Sleep podcast. And as always, thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you next time. Welcome to this house. This is our family's shrine room. Our ancestors worshipped here every day, but it's been neglected ever since we moved into the city. But I always find them completely rotten when I come out here. It's like they were soaked in acid. Also, that candle, it must have burned itself out last night, because there's not a single air current in this room. It always amazes me how these candles light themselves and burn throughout the night. The doors have been sealed shut for over 50 years. Nobody's opened them since my grandmother passed away. He was able to escape the chaos outside and hid himself inside the shrine. But before he could seal the doors shut, his friends arrived. But everyone else thinks that's a terrible idea. They think that whatever lies behind there should stay behind there. They said they had come to rescue him, but they locked him inside and buried him alive. Something like I'll get cursed. I'm not scared, so yesterday I decided to do it anyway. There was also dust everywhere. So much so that we couldn't even tell what kind of wood the walls were made of. After sweeping all of it away, we found a giant golden statue of Buddha in the center of the room. Once they saw what lay behind the doors, though, they were all glad I'd made us take this journey, and a big drum in the corner. I hit the drum with a stick. It sounded awful, but it seemed to anger the spirit priest. It was either that or let him be torn limb from limb by the rebels outside. But you can hear strange whispers coming from behind there, can't you? I'm just very curious. What's going on in there? People came from all around to pray to the begging Buddha here, but it was destroyed during the Civil War. It belonged to my great-grandfather, the last person who prayed to the shrine before it was abandoned. He helped everyone who visited the pagoda, healed their illnesses, and predicted their futures. They fell off the wall when I was trying to sweep the webs away. They thought they were doing the right thing, but in reality, he was still able to use his powers. They wanted to force him to use his powers to heal their wounded, but he refused. Instead, he invoked his god, causing the ground to shake and the mountains to crumble. Only the main hall remains standing. No one dares enter it, so I am the only one who continues to pray here. I hope the spirit priest finds peace. If I'm being honest, I don't want to disturb him. Many people were killed and their souls trapped inside. Other times it's completely silent, and many people lost their lives here, crushed by falling pillars and drowned in a sudden flood. I didn't think there'd actually be a ghost here. It's like I knew this place before I discovered it. Was I responsible for building this pagoda? Or maybe I was one of his friends who betrayed him. But now that I've met the spirit priest, I kind of wish I'd left him in peace. All the land around the pagoda sank into the mud. That's when the pagoda became known as the tomb of the spirit priest. But I need to know the truth. I need to find out what happened here. It's hard to make out, but I think I can hear him saying my name. There are so many graves here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were booby-trapped. I found some old documents in a wooden box. I don't know how they survived for so long. So the spirit priest's friends must have scattered after he died. They probably hid his body parts in different places. If we don't find anything, we can move on to the next site. It wasn't a prayer, it was a list of names. It's not very detailed, but it looks like an old man. Do you think that's the spirit priest? My grandmother built this shrine, but she didn't pray to any gods. I wonder if we can find its original location. Maybe we can rebuild the pagoda here instead of just leaving these four walls. She prayed to her own parents. She would whisper her prayers into the crack of the door, but they never got an answer. There were bones everywhere, but none of them belonged to the spirit priest. Now that he knows I'm here, the whispers are getting louder. Look, it says, quote, "In the year of the dog, the 10th day of the 3rd month, Master Wu built the begging Buddha pagoda." It's horrible, but it's also beautiful in a way. That's why she sealed the doors shut before she died. I pushed aside the dirt and uncovered a wooden box. I went to go check it out and found a young woman kneeling by the river. She asked me if I could help her bury the body. I agreed, and we brought the corpse over to the pagoda. There's a series of numbers carved into the back of the skull. I think I recognize them. Instead, I hear phrases like "find my friends," "they betrayed me," and "vengeance." Just as we were about to cover it up, the woman shouted, "Wait." We also keep offerings at the front of the shrine. Usually flowers and fruit, nothing valuable. Took it everywhere with him and wouldn't let anyone else see it. And what about this? You see this drawing pad here? Every time I visit, I write a prayer on this pad and tie it to the shrine. But the next day, the pages are gone without a trace. It must have been a curse from the spirit priest. I won't be reincarnated again. Goodbye. I don't believe in ghosts, so I never get scared. At first, it looked like gibberish. Then I realized they were written in the same language as the diary. You see, this was originally an old pagoda. It's called Begging Buddha. It contained the only remaining piece of the spirit priest's body, his tongue. But nobody listened to him. They thought he was crazy. They say the last person who entered the shrine was a spirit priest. Thank you for returning my body. I can finally rest in peace. Don't worry about me. I'm in a good place. It's just that I want to tell you something. I want to tell you about my friends. They betrayed me and buried me alive. But that wasn't their fault. It was the fault of this guy. He was a corrupt official who bribed the government. He ordered my friends to kill me so I couldn't interfere with his plans. He wanted to use the pagoda to steal people's money and force them to pray to him instead of the real gods. I tried to stop him, but I was already too weak. The only thing I could do was hide my body and wait for someone to resurrect me. I waited over 80 years for someone to come to my rescue, but no one did. That's why I cursed the pagoda. I wanted to destroy it and take the corrupt official with me. But you came along and returned my body. Thank you for that. It's a reward. I'll give you the chance to become immortal. Will you accept it? Every night, his spirit walks the earth, seeking vengeance against those who betrayed him. Some days I hear his voice whispering behind the doors. Now, I've always been curious about what lies behind those doors, and I've been wanting to open them ever since I became head of the family. All I do know is that I should have left him in peace. My cousin even told me that if I open the doors, something bad will happen to me. I called a few workers over and we started to pry the doors open. Everyone stared at me like I was crazy. I call out for help, but no one answers. The only reply is the sound of my own screams. The room was covered in cobwebs. This must have been the main shrine back then. We also found some small statues on the sides. I could feel the temperature of the room drop drastically, and then I heard a loud crash from somewhere in the walls, and everything went silent again. I also found these two statues here. They were holding lotus flowers and were probably part of a larger statue. But look under here. It looks like someone carved a face into the floor. There was another room behind the shrine, but it looked like a regular bedroom. One of the papers was a receipt for the construction of the pagoda. It seems like this was built many years ago. According to Chinese astrology, this would have been sometime between 1628 and 1644, so it really is an ancient pagoda. After searching through all the documents, I found a diary. He wrote down everything that happened here, including the story of the spirit priest. His name was Liu Bansheng. But one day, the rebels came here looking for him. That's when his friends came and buried him alive. Great-grandpa writes that after he died, the pagoda became a place of misfortune. The last entry is from December 1937. It reads, "Today the pagoda collapsed. I feel sad reading this. It sounds like he never did find peace. The whole reason I opened this place was out of curiosity. Look at this. The diary ends right here, yet the last page is filled with whispers. My name is spelled differently, but I think he knows I'm his descendant. It feels like he wants to talk to me, but he's unable to form full sentences. The spirit priest wants revenge on those who buried him alive. But what about the people who built this shrine? What happened to them?" As soon as I entered this room, I felt a strong sense of familiarity. Was I related to the spirit priest in some way? I keep hearing more and more voices behind these walls. Is this really the tomb of the spirit priest? I don't know where to start digging. If we don't hurry, it might be too late. Suddenly I remembered that scroll I found in the shrine room. They're the names of the spirit priest's friends. This is a map of the pagoda grounds. I recognize that hill. That's where we found the statue. These two symbols probably mark the locations of the other pagodas. It would be easier to dig up the bodies if we had heavy machinery in here, but I don't think the villagers would appreciate that. Alright, let's start here. I kept digging, but I had no luck. It was starting to get dark, so I called everyone over for one last search. Suddenly, one of the workers shouted, "Look, there's something here." They had found a hole in the ground, but it didn't look new. Inside was a stack of cloth. I carefully peeled it away and found a human skull. I think this might belong to the spirit priest. It's missing its jaw, though. Wonder where that is. Then I noticed something strange. They're the same numbers on the scroll from the shrine. This is definitely the spirit priest's skull. But why did they throw it in a random hole? Where's the rest of his body? I continued digging until I found the missing pieces. I wish I hadn't seen this. It looks like the spirit priest was laid to rest in the end. His soul finally has peace. So that's the end of the story, right? Well, not exactly. Later that night, I heard someone crying in the forest. She said she was praying for her brother, who had recently died. We dug a hole and lowered the coffin into it. She said she needed to show me something. Inside the coffin, she had hidden a wooden box. She said this belonged to her brother. She opened it and revealed a stack of papers. They were tied together with a red string. She asked me to read them, so I did. He called himself the reincarnation of the spirit priest. Said he'd been reborn, but he still remembered his past life. That's why he constantly had nightmares and tried to warn others about the pagoda. That's why he took the box with him everywhere. He wanted to use its power to heal the sick and bring prosperity to the land, but he couldn't figure out how. On the last page, he wrote, "Today I was bitten by a snake." The woman cried as she read this. She said her brother hadn't gone crazy after all. But why was he cursed? Why did the spirit priest want revenge? I don't know, but I think it has something to do with this. A few weeks later, I brought a medium to the site. She said she could communicate with the dead. It took a while, but eventually she was able to contact the spirit priest. He told her that he wanted to speak with me directly, so I sat down and closed my eyes. This is what he said. Before I could respond, he vanished. Does that mean I'm immortal now?
I don't know.
Ever since the spirit priest left, I haven't been able to sleep. I keep having the same nightmare. I'm trapped inside a crumbling pagoda. Now, I hate to admit this, but I think the spirit priest was right. I shouldn't have disturbed his grave. Some shrines don't protect the living. They imprison the dead.